Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahavidyan Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. That looks okay. It's all looking fine. Okay. Welcome back to our weekly class on the Bhagavad Gita. We continue in Chapter 4, and we'll begin with some recitation, starting with verse 29. As always, please glance at the translation and then repeat after me. Apane juhvati pranam, apane juhvati pranam, prane panam tata pare, prane panam tata pare, prana panagati rudva, prana panagati rudva, pranayama parayanaha, pranayama parayanaha, apare niyataharaha, apare niyataharaha, pranan praneshu juhvati, pranan praneshu juhvati, sarve pyete yajnavido, sarve pyete yajnavido, Yajñakshapita kalmashaha, Yajñakshapita kalmashaha, Yajñashishtamrita bhujo, Yajñashishtamrita bhujo, Yanti brahma sanatanam, Yanti brahma sanatanam, Nayam lokosya yajñasya, Nayam lokosya yajñasya, Kutonyah kuru sattama, Kutonyas kuru sattama, Evam bahuvidha yajña, Evam bahuvidha yajña, Vitata brahmano mukhe, Vitata brahmano mukhe, Karmajan vidhitan sarvan, Karmajan vidhitan sarvan, Evam nyatva vimokshase, Evam nyatva vimokshase, Shreyan dravyamayad yajñat, Shreyan dravyamayad yajñat, Jnana yajñah parantapa, Jnana yajñah parantapa, Sarvam karma kilam partha, Sarvam karma kilam partha, Jnane parisamapyate, Jnane parisamapyate, Tadvidhi pranipatena, Tadvidhi pranipatena, Pariprashnena sevaya, Pariprashnena sevaya, Upadekshanti te jnanam, Upadekshanti te jnanam, Jnaninas tattvadarshibhi darshinaha, Jnaninas tattvadarshinaha, Yajñatva napunar moham, Yajñatva napunar moham. Evam yasyasi pandava, Evam yasyasi pandava, Yena bhutanya sheshani, Yena bhutanya sheshani, Drakshyasyatman yato mayi, Drakshyasyatman yato mayi. We'll stop there and pick up the thread. Let's see, we had finished verse 30. We'll continue with verse 31. And to set the context for today's class, this whole section, as you remember, deals with sacrifice, an attitude of sacrifice. Sri Krishna uses the word yajna. And yajna is a word specifically meant for a fire ritual, a ritual in which sacrificial offerings are made into a fire. But here he's using yajna as a metaphor for this attitude of sacrifice, which is part of the teachings of Karma Yoga. So we're seeing still the teachings of Karma Yoga being explained here. And specifically, when you sacrifice your own agenda, when you set aside your own likes and dislikes, and instead choose to follow Dharma, carry out your responsibilities. That's a kind of sacrifice. That sacrifice is what Sri Krishna is talking about in this section. And it is a sacrifice. You have to sacrifice what you want for the sake of what you should do according to the principles of Dharma. Then Sri Krishna broadened that idea of sacrifice to apply to all kinds of sadhana. We saw a couple of verses ago where he talks about when you're practicing pranayama, breathing exercises, you sacrifice the inhalation into the exhalation. You sacrifice the exhalation into the inhalation. Or when you eat, whatever you put in your mouth is sacrificed unto the divinity within you. So he's describing how all of our activities can be, as you know, Karma Yoga in the most general sense is turning ordinary activities into a spiritual practice. Here Sri Krishna gets more specific and talks about a manner of converting ordinary activities into Karma Yoga in general, but specifically into a kind of sacrifice. And that is what we're going to see. We're at the end of this section, a couple more verses on this idea of sacrifice. So let us pick up the thread. Yajna shishtamrita bhujo, yajna shishtamrita bhujo, yanti brahma sanatanam, yanti brahma sanatanam, nayam lokostya yajnasya, nayam lokostya yajnasya, kutonya kuru sattama, kutonya kuru sattama. Yajna shishta amrita bhujaha. You have to explain this. The context of this verse is receiving prasada. Prasada, and we need to set the context. Both the context in terms of yajna and a more familiar context, the context of puja. Yajna is fire ritual. Fire ritual was the primary form of worship thousands of years ago. Today, the primary form of Hindu worship is no longer yajna, but rather puja. Puja is a form of worship in which there are one or more deities upon an altar. Those deities are consecrated deities, and we offer prayers unto those deities. We also offer many other things. We offer flowers, we offer incense and lights. And certainly one of the many things we offer to the deities on the altar is food. So we prepare food, physically put that food on the altar, purify the food, and ritually offer it unto the deities on the altar. Of course, at the end of the ritual, the food remains there. So that food that remains, having been offered to the deities, that food is distributed to the worshippers. That food is called prasada. Prasada here means a gift of Ishvara to you. The food that is offered is called naivedya. Don't mix up these two words. You don't bring prasada to offer. Prasada is what you receive. The food you bring is called naivedya, which literally means that which is to be offered. So that naivedya, having been offered to the Lord, is no longer ours. It now belongs to Ishvara. Since it remains at the end of the ritual, it is distributed to worshippers as a gift from Ishvara. That is prasada. And to look upon that food as a gift from Ishvara is called prasada buddhi. Buddhi here means attitude. The attitude that it is not just food, it is, we can call it sanctified food. More specifically, it is food which is a gift from Ishvara. A similar thing is done during yajna, yajna being the more ancient form of ritual. So food is also one of the offerings into that fire. Small amounts of food are offered into the sacrificial fire from a larger bowl of food. And that larger bowl of food, of course, is first ritually purified. And then after the yajna is over, that purified food, having been ritually offered into the fire, is also, like prasada, it is considered to be possessed by Ishvara, no longer by us. And therefore, when that food left over at the end of a ritual is distributed to the worshippers, it too can be called prasada. Whether it is prasada at the end of a puja, whether it is prasada at the end of a yajna, it is a gift from God in the form of food distributed to worshippers. Now, it's important to understand that tradition, to understand this verse. This verse refers to yajna shishta amrita. Take those three words. It's one long compound. Amrita here doesn't mean immortality. It means nectar, that which is nectarous, that which is divine. And what is divine is yajna shishta, that which is shishta, left over at the end of a yajna, at the end of a ritual. So yajna shishta amrita is the consecrated food, the sanctified food left over at the end of a ritual. And bhujaha is for one who takes that food, one who eats that food, one who consumes that sanctified food. So yajna shishtamrita bhujaha, for one who consumes the sanctified food which remains after the performance of a ritual, for that person, for such a person, such people, it's nominative plural, such people, yanti brahma, yanti, they reach Brahma, Brahman, the reality of the universe, Sanatanam, the eternal, timeless Brahman, meaning to reach Brahman is to become enlightened. So here Sri Krishna says, those who partake in this sanctified food left over after a ritual, they reach Brahman, they become enlightened. Now, please don't think this is some mechanical thing where all you have to do to get enlightened, you just eat this food and magically you're enlightened. Come on, we're mature enough not to take such a naive understanding here. Sri Krishna says you become enlightened because this is a spiritual practice which prepares you for enlightenment. Eating this food won't make you enlightened, but this attitude will make you enlightened. And here we have to remember that Sri Krishna here is using yajna as a metaphor. So literally, he says, those who consume the food left over, the food that is offered in a ritual, those who consume that food reach Brahman, they become enlightened. That's a metaphor. Yajna that ritual is a metaphor for what? For all spiritual practices. In fact, it's a metaphor for all activities of life. This is a metaphor by which Sri Krishna describes what I said before, prasada buddhi, the attitude of prasada. So when you get that food at the end of a puja or end of a yajna, you take it with your right hand and you take it with a sense of reverence because it is a gift of God. That is the attitude of prasada buddhi. That which you receive from Ishvara is prasada. But now let's generalize it. Since yajna is a metaphor, what we receive from Ishvara every day of our lives is the fruits of our own deeds. We discussed this starting way back in chapter 2, where we understood Ishvara to be karma phala data. Remember that expression? The giver of the fruits of our deeds. We perform actions, and we receive the results of those actions according to the laws of the cosmos which are Ishvara's laws. Therefore, we understand that when we perform any action, we receive the results of that action according to Ishvara's laws, according to Ishvara's will, and metaphorically we can say we receive the results of our deeds from Ishvara, from Ishvara's hands, so to speak. We commit a deed and we receive the results from Ishvara. That which we receive from Ishvara is a gift, is prasada. So to look at the food we receive at the end of a ritual as prasada, that's ordinary. Not ordinary, I mean, it's special, but it's a more common understanding. Here, we're generalizing this prasada buddhi, this attitude of prasada. We're generalizing it to not just what you receive at the end of a ritual, what you receive every day of your life. The results of your past actions, actions you've committed in this life, the actions you've committed in past lives, whatever results come into your life, you can look upon all of that as prasada, as coming from Ishvara's hands, like receiving sanctified food after a ritual. Here, we're receiving the results of all of our deeds, receiving it from Ishvara with a prayerful attitude. That prayerful attitude is prasada buddhi, the attitude of prasada, the attitude of receiving anything as a gift of God, and here applied in the most general sense, receiving all the results of our past deeds, receiving them from Ishvara with that sense of prasada buddhi, that sense of receiving a gift of Ishvara. This is a very important aspect of karma yoga. We've discussed it before, and here it comes again. So here, using that metaphor of yajna being extended to just not merely rituals, but all the deeds of our lives can be the results of every deed we commit. When we receive those results, we understand those results come from Ishvara, and we receive those results with a prayerful attitude. Because they come from Ishvara, we look upon them as gifts of God, prasada. And to make his point very clear, Sri Krishna says at the end of the third line, ayajñasya, for one who doesn't perform the rituals, but remember this yajna is being used as a metaphor. So ayagnyasya literally means for one who doesn't do any rituals. Well, in fact, let's take the simple meaning here. Ayagnyasya, for one who doesn't do rituals, na ayam lokaha asti. Na asti. There is nothing. There is no ayam loka, nothing ayam lokaha, this world. There is nothing accomplished in this world. I'm paraphrasing. There is no success in this world, ayagnyasya, for one who doesn't perform these ritual sacrifices. And he continues, kutaha anyaha. What does kutaha, what to speak of anyaha, anya loka, other worlds, the next life? So literally, Sri Krishna says, ayagnyasya, for one who performs no ritual sacrifice there is nothing achieved in this world, in this life, or in the next. You achieve nothing in this life or in the next life if you fail to perform ritual sacrifice. But here, ritual sacrifice is the metaphor. The metaphor he's been using for the last half a dozen verses. And that metaphor means yajna here represents this attitude we've just described, prasada buddhi. For one, so now we'll reinterpret it following this metaphor, ayajnasya, for one who does not have this attitude of prasada buddhi, for one who considers the results received in life, the results of past actions, are received in a very mechanical way. For someone who is absolutely non-religious, for someone who has no concept of or relationship with Ishvara, for someone who doesn't have a devotional aspect of their lives. So ayajnasya, for one who lacks this prasada buddhi, wherein you see the results of your actions like prasada, like a gift of God. For such a person, na ayam loka asti. Such a person accomplishes nothing in this life. Kutaha anyaha, what to speak of the next life. So Sri Krishna is using some very strong language here to stress the importance of this prasada buddhi. And he concludes by addressing Arjuna as Kuru Sattama, the Sattama, the best of the Kuru lineage, the best of the Kuru family. Okay, let's continue. Evam bahuvidha yajna, evam bahuvidha yajna, vitata brahmano mukhe, vitata brahmano mukhe, karmajan vidhitan sarvan, karmajan vidhitan sarvan, evam jnatva vimokshase, evam jnatva vimokshase. With this verse, Sri Krishna now is concluding this topic in which yajna has been used as an extended metaphor. Evam, thus, bahuvidaha yajnaha. Thus are these yajnaha, these rituals, and by rituals he means all the various sadhanas and all the various attitudes in which you bring this dimension of sacrifice into your life. So the yajna here literally means sacrifice, and in a metaphorical sense, it's all the ways in which we practice sacrifice as karma yoga. Again, the basic sacrifice is to sacrifice your raga dvesha, your likes and dislikes, to sacrifice your own agenda for the sake of following dharma. That's the basic sacrifice. But then in these past verses, Sri Krishna has extended that to apply to various kinds of sadhana, including eating. As we said, when you eat food, it is a kind of sacrifice into a sacrificial fire of digestion, so to speak. We've spoken about this before. And Sri Krishna has given many examples of this, so he calls them Bahuvidha Yajna, the sacrifice of many kinds. And these sacrifices of many kinds, Vitata, have expanded forth from where? Brahmanaha Mukhe. They have come from the mukha, the mouth of Brahmaji. Mouth of Brahmaji. So Brahmaji, God as creator, is considered the source of our Vedic scriptures. Our Vedic scriptures are poetically said to have emerged from the breath of Brahmaji, so to speak. Brahmaji being God as creator. So Shri Krishna here refers to that poetic understanding. So all of these various kinds of yajnas, all of these various attitudes of sacrifice have vitata, they have spread forth, brahmano mukhe, from the mouth of God as creator. And of course that means from the Vedas, from our Vedic scriptures. And Sri Krishna continues, he addresses Arjuna, O Arjuna, vidhi, understand, tan sarvan, understand all of those yajnas, all of those rituals in a literal sense, but all of those manners in which you can have the attitude of sacrifice, the attitude of looking upon your day-to-day activities as a kind of sacrificial offering to God. This is the attitude of karma yoga. So Arjuna vidhi, understand, tan sarvan, all of those are karmajan. All of those are born of karma. All of those are kinds of karma. All of them are karma yoga, which is the topic we're seeing here. All of these are forms of karma yoga. Evam jnatva, and understanding this, not just understanding, but understanding this attitude of sacrifice and putting it into your life, into your day-to-day activities, by living your life, by bringing this attitude of sacrifice into your day-to-day activities, vimokshase, you will gain liberation. You will be freed, because this karma yoga is a very powerful sadhana, a very important spiritual practice that prepares you for enlightenment. Without the performance of this karma yoga, you will never be prepared to gain enlightenment, so it is crucial, it is essential. And here the karma yoga, as I said some time ago, is not one thing, but a whole assemblage of attitudes, attitudes which in general convert our ordinary activities into forms of spiritual practice. And here specifically Sri Krishna has been talking about this attitude of sacrifice. Everything in life can be understood as a sacrifice to Ishvara, a sacrificial offering to Ishvara. Okay. Now that finishes the topic, and we move on to the next topic. Next topic deals more with spiritual wisdom, and spiritual wisdom here is called jnana. Jnana means knowledge, but be careful when we're using the word jnana, and you'll see that it comes here in the second line. When we speak of jnana as knowledge, we're not talking about ordinary knowledge. We're not talking about knowledge like knowledge of computers or knowledge of cooking. We're talking about spiritual wisdom in particular. We're talking about knowledge in a sense of discovery of the ultimate truth. Discovery of your ultimate truth, the inner divinity within you, and discovery of the ultimate truth of the universe, to discover that everything that exists is a manifestation of the divine. This is that spiritual wisdom. This is what's referred to as jnana here. Let's see the verse. Shreyan dravyamayad yajnad. Shreyan dravyamayad yajnad. Jnana yajna parantapa. Jnana yajna parantapa. Sarvam karma kilam partha. Sarvam karma kilam partha. Jnane parisamapyate. Jnane parisamapyate. So Sri Krishna has used this metaphor of yajna so extensively. He's a little concerned that Arjuna or anyone else might get confused and say, oh, yajna, all I need to do for enlightenment is go on making ritual offerings into a sacrificial fire, to offer ghee, for example, into that ritual fire. And Sri Krishna wants to make very clear that's not what he means. He's used that word yajna as a metaphor. So he says here that yajnat, dravyamaya yajnat, compared to a yajna, a ritual worship which is dravyamaya, made of dravya means substance. So and he's referring here to a ritual in which physical things, physical offerings like ghee, are offered into that sacrificial fire. So he says, compared to performing a ritual in which substances are offered into that sacrificial fire, shreyan, better than that, is what? Jnana yajnaha, a ritual of knowledge. So he's comparing here a normal yajna in which you offer ghee into a fire. He's comparing that to jnana yajna. We saw that term before. And we saw that jnana yajna, an offering of knowledge, an offering of wisdom. We said that, I mentioned that my Parama Guru, Swami Chinmayananda, Gurudev, liked to use that word for teaching. He called all of his discourses jnana yajna. It was his offering of spiritual wisdom, offering to Ishvara in the form of all of his students. So jnana yajna, an offering in the form of wisdom, can refer to teaching, in the sense that Swami Chinmayananda ji used the term, but it can also refer to study. Because when you engage in spiritual studies, you are making a sacrifice. What are you sacrificing? You could be doing all kinds of things which are, in a manner of speaking, more fun. You could be hanging out with your friends. You could be going out for dinner. You could be watching television or any other thing. But you have sacrificed all of those activities for the sake of pursuing spiritual wisdom. So jnana yajna, this offering of spiritual wisdom here, can also be used in a sense of spiritual study. Sri Krishna addresses Arjuna here as parantapa, O mighty, literally, scorcher of foes. By the way, just a comment here. Some teachers like to read all kinds of profound meanings into the choice of names, these are terms of address, into the choice of terms of address used for Arjuna. And they'll say, oh, he said parantapa for this reason. But I'm not sure that's true, because look in the very next line, Sri Krishna is addressed as Partha. Partha means the son of Kunti. So in the prior line, Arjuna is addressed as scorcher of foes. In the very next line, he's addressed as son of Kunti. The point I'm making is maybe we shouldn't read too much into the particular form of address. Otherwise, these two forms of address would probably not be used in consecutive lines, in my point. Okay, so the next line, Sri Krishna addresses Arjuna, Partha, O son of Kunti, Sarvam Akhilam Karma, Sarvam all, Akhilam also means all. So all without exception. All what? All karmas. All karmas, all actions, all deeds, without exception, excuse me, all deeds, and in the context of karma yoga, all deeds performed as karma yoga. That's our topic. We're not talking about deeds in general. We're not talking about deeds in the sense of the mechanical performance of a ritual. So pouring ghee into that fire is a karma. It is a ritual. It is a deed. But here, Sri Krishna is not talking about the mechanical performance of actions. He's been talking about attitude of karma yoga. So, sarvam karmakhilam, all karmas, all deeds performed with the attitude of karma yoga, all deeds performed as a kind of sadhana, as a kind of spiritual practice, all such deeds, parisamapyate, they all culminate in, they all reach jnane, they all culminate in knowledge. They all lead to knowledge. And again, the jnana, the knowledge we're talking about here, is not any kind of knowledge. It is specifically knowledge of reality. The reality of you, the divine nature, and reality of the universe, the divinity of everything that exists. So the performance of all deeds with the attitude of karma yoga, the transformation of all deeds into a form of spiritual practice prepares you to gain the spiritual wisdom, this knowledge of truth, knowledge of reality, and thereby become enlightened. Now, in introducing the next verse, I have a note here. The commentator, Madhusudana Saraswati, is a commentator I've been using this time for the Bhagavad Gita. He introduces the next verse saying, Kaha atyasannaha upayaha. So, kaha upayaha, what is the means to get that knowledge? And he uses this adjective, atyasanna. What is the most direct means of gaining this knowledge? This, and again, knowledge here means spiritual wisdom in a sense of recognizing your own divine nature, recognizing the universe as a manifestation of that divinity. So what is the most direct means for gaining that knowledge? Sri Krishna says, Tadvidhi pranipatena, tadvidhi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevaya, upadekshanti te jnanam, jnaninas tattvadarshinaha, jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. In fact, start with the last line here. So, what is the most direct means of gaining this knowledge? Sri Krishna talks about jnaninaha, those who possess that knowledge. If you seek that spiritual wisdom, where should you go to receive that spiritual wisdom? Obviously, to those who already possess that spiritual wisdom. If you need money, you seek out someone who has money. If you need emotional comfort, you seek out someone capable of giving you emotional comfort. Here, if you seek out the spiritual wisdom, where should you look? Jnaninaha, those wise ones, those enlightened ones. In fact, that's what he says in the next part. Tattvadarshinaha, those who are tattvadarshi, those who have discovered tattva, reality, truth, seers of truth, discoverers, those who have discovered this absolute reality, that one reality, the reality we call Brahman, the reality which is the divinity because of which you exist, I exist, the entire cosmos exists. So those who have discovered that underlying reality because of which everything exists, they, go back to the third line, they, meaning those who have this knowledge, they upadekshanti, they will teach, future tense. They will teach, they will impart jnanam. In fact, you can take it two ways. Te jnanam, their knowledge. You can also take it. They will impart that knowledge that you seek unto you, that knowledge. And with regard to that knowledge, now go back up to the top. That knowledge, tat vidhi, tat, that knowledge, vidhi, you should understand. So they will teach it to you, but it's up to you to understand. No one can make you understand. No one can make you enlightened. A teacher can teach. In fact, I remember Puja Swami Tadatmananda, my guru, saying that he's been teaching for decades and decades and decades. And he presumes that some people get enlightened. No doubt some people get enlightened. But he has no way of making anyone enlightened. He understood that very clearly. That's what's being taught here. So the wise ones will teach you, but it's up to you to make that discovery. The wise ones will lead you to this discovery. In fact, Puja Swamiji put it very nicely. He said, the role of a teacher is to lead you to a place wherein you cannot but see. I'm trying to get his exact words. A teacher is one who uses words, uses language, and in his exact words, he uses language to lead you to a point where you cannot but see what is to be seen, what is being taught. So you have to see. No one can see for you. You have to understand. No one can understand for you. So tad vidhi, O Arjuna, vidhi. You must understand that knowledge. How? And he gives 3 important bits of advice on what will empower you to assimilate this knowledge from your teacher. It has to go in. If it doesn't penetrate that hard skull, if nothing goes in, then all is wasted. So what will help you assimilate that knowledge? And Sri Krishna gives 3 keys for assimilating that knowledge. He says, tat vidhi, you should gain that knowledge, you should understand their teachings. How? Pranipatena. Pranipata literally means bowing, performing obeisance, acts of reverence. And what that refers to in a broader sense is an attitude towards your teacher. Could be an attitude of reverence, but more than an attitude of reverence, an attitude we call shraddha. Now, shraddha, be very careful. Shraddha does not mean simply faith. Too often, faith is understood as blind faith, andavishwasa. Shraddha does not mean blind faith, andavishwasa. In fact, blind faith is an impediment to understanding, honestly. If you have blind faith, you'll rest with that blind faith and you won't go further to gain knowledge. So you'll rest content with your faith and you will fail to gain knowledge. Blind faith is an impediment to gaining spiritual wisdom. Surprising, but true. So here, Shraddha doesn't mean blind faith. Shraddha is an attitude in which you truly feel that the teacher possesses. In fact, let me rephrase that. Shraddha here is the assumption that your teacher possesses that which you want to know. I'll say that again. Shraddha is an attitude in which you presume the teacher possesses in full measure the very wisdom that you want to acquire. Another definition of Shraddha is acceptance pending verification. And that pending verification point makes it so clear that it is not blind faith. So acceptance pending verification means you take in the teachings of your guru and then you test those teachings. That's the verification. You test those teachings to see if they hold up, to see if there are any problems, any shortcomings, any weakness with those teachings. So it's not blind acceptance. You don't just swallow those teachings, but rather you accept those teachings, presuming that your guru is a source. Your guru possesses the spiritual wisdom that you want to gain. So that attitude is one of three keys Sri Krishna gives. The second is pariprashnena, by questioning, by asking questions. So the first attitude of reverence or shraddha doesn't mean you just sit quietly and receive whatever your guru is saying. Pariprashnena means you're actively engaged to the extent of asking questions. Again, it shows how clearly this is not a matter of blind faith. You have to ask questions because when the teacher teaches, it's inevitable that you'll have doubts and questions and lapses of understanding. There'll be blind spots, guaranteed, always is the case. So whenever there is a doubt or a question, you must ask pariprashnena, because it's crucial to gain a very clear, well ascertained, doubt-free understanding. And that can only be done by asking questions, pariprashnena, and also sevaya. Seva, of course, means service, but here, service of the teacher. What kind of seva, what kind of service does a teacher really want? Now, the teacher doesn't, there are some practical needs. Okay, every teacher needs food, you need some shelter, etc., etc. But generally, those basic needs are met. So if the teacher doesn't need food, if the teacher doesn't need shelter, if the teacher has no particular material needs, what kind of seva does the teacher? I'm smiling now, just thinking of a humorous image. In so many, I have to say this, in Hindi movies, you see the guru is laying down on the couch, and the student wants to give seva, service. And what does the guru do? Presses the legs of the guru, the massage of the legs and feet of the guru. Okay, but maybe the guru doesn't want or need his legs, his legs to be massaged. The point I'm making is the most fundamental way of serving your guru is to study and understand, to be regular in attending classes, to be bright and engaged in those classes, to be asking questions after those classes. That's the kind of seva that a guru wants. The seva every guru wants is for the student to be fully engaged in the process of learning. So these are the three keys. So you approach a guru, a teacher, one who knows the spiritual wisdom, that guru will impart the teachings to you. It's up to you to assimilate those teachings with the help of the right attitudes, questioning, and commitment. Okay, we'll see one more verse. Yajñātva napunar moham, yajñātva napunar moham, evam yasyasi pandava, evam yasyasi pandava, yena bhutanya sheshani, yena bhutanya sheshani, drakshasyatman yato mayi, drakshasyatman yato mayi. Yajñātva, having gained that spiritual wisdom from the teacher, you've sought out a teacher, you asked questions, you were committed, and that teacher imparted the wisdom to you. Yajñātva, and having gained that wisdom from your teacher, na punaha moham, you will na punaha, never again, moham, will you undergo delusion. You will be freed, in our context, you will be completely freed from the compulsions of raga dvesha. Remember, raga is to be compelled to chase after what you want. Dvesha is to be compelled to run away from what you don't want. But when you discover the true source of contentment within, and you discover that that contentment is utterly undisturbed by anything that happens in life, what is there to run after, or what is there to run away from? This compulsion of raga dvesha is called here moham, and Sri Krishna says you will never again be subject to that kind of moha, that kind of confusion. Evam yasyasi, in that way, yasyasi, you will gain this complete freedom from the compulsions of raga dvesha. You will gain complete freedom from ignorance, from confusion. Pandava, O son of Pandu, Arjuna, yena, and through this spiritual wisdom, we have to connect the words now. Yena, by means of this spiritual wisdom, in the last line, drakshyasi, you have to break the words apart. Through this spiritual wisdom, drakshyasi, you will see. Prior verse, Sri Krishna described the wise ones as those who have seen reality. Here, he's saying that you too will see the reality. Yena, by means of this wisdom, drakshyasi, you will see. You will see what? In the third line, bhutani, all that exists. Asheshani, without exception. You will see all beings, everything that exists without exception. You will see it atmani, in the last line, in yourself, atta, and mayi, in me. A little obscure. You, by means of this spiritual wisdom, you will see all that exists in yourself and in me, Sri Krishna says. This is a poetic way of describing this vision of non-duality, Advaita. This vision of non-duality where you finally discover that whatever you experience is a manifestation of the one underlying reality. That one underlying reality we can loosely call the divinity that dwells within all. More specifically in Advaita Vedanta, we call that Brahman, the absolute substratum, the reality because of which everything exists. By means of this spiritual wisdom, you discover the absolute reality because of which you exist, because of which I exist, because of which Sri Krishna exists, the absolute reality because of which everything exists. This is the vision of non-duality, the vision of Advaita, and that vision of Advaita comes as a result of the spiritual wisdom imparted by those teachers, by those who have themselves discovered this vision of non-duality. Good. Before we conclude our class today, an announcement about our ashram here in New Jersey. We are gradually reopening. We've been closed for about 1.5 years because of the pandemic. We are gradually reopening. We've already resumed our weekly satsanga, our question-answer sessions on Sunday evenings at 5 p.m. have resumed. And now, starting next Saturday, we're going to resume this Bhagavad Gita class as an in-person class. So far it's been online, but starting next Saturday, it will be in person. Next Saturday, October 2nd. It'll become an in-person class. And then later, our gradual reopening, we will gradually add other classes. We'll resume our Tuesday Vedanta class. We'll resume our Sanskrit class. We'll resume our meditation session. So all of these will gradually be resumed as we proceed. And we'll let you know when. If you are coming next Saturday, it's important that you are fully vaccinated and you'll be required to wear a mask. We have to act for the safety of all of our students. And for those of you who don't live nearby and are going to be watching online, please don't worry. We'll continue to have this Bhagavad Gita class available online with a change. So far we've been doing this webcast, but now we're moving to this different lecture hall, and we find it's very difficult to do any kind of live broadcast here. We did for a while and had great difficulty. So instead of a webcast, what we'll do is we'll upload the class. It's very simple. Instead of a webcast, each class will be uploaded. The class takes place at 11 a.m. on Saturday, and the class will be uploaded 11 a.m. on Sunday. 24 hours later, we will upload to the class to YouTube. You can watch the class online. It won't be interrupted. If you want any further information, all this information will be available on our website. Maybe in a couple of days it'll be available on our website. Also on our website you can sign up for program announcements, and that way you can receive an email whenever we institute a new program. Okay, we'll conclude with the prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhaveta Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.